أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن المتقين في جنات ونهر في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر. في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان. الشمس والقمر بحسبان. الشمس والقمر بحسبان. والنجم والشجر يسجدان. والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان. والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان. ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن يخسر الميزان بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن المتقين في جنات ونهر في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن المتقين في جنات ونهر في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان إن المتقين في جنات ونهر في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر الرحمن الرحمن علم القرآن الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن المتقين في جنات ونهر في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان والأرض وضعها للأنام والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العظيم. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله. اللهم اجعلنا يا مولانا في شهرنا هذا وفي ليلتنا هذه من عتقائك من النار واجعلنا يا مولانا من المغفورين. اللهم إنك عفو تحب العفو فاعف عنا. اللهم اجعلنا من حزبك فإن حزبك هم الغالبون. اللهم اجعلنا من حزبك فإن حزبك هم الغالبون. اللهم اجعلنا من جندك فإن جندك هم الغالبون. اللهم اجعلنا من أوليائك فلا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. صلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ماشي بنور الله ماشي، ماشي بنور الله ماشي، ماشي بنور الله ماشي، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب، أبقى بالحسن رجاء زدني بحبك حب يا رب، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب، أبقى بحسن رجاء زدني بحبك حب يا رب، وبارك لي بعيالي وبصحتي وبمالي وبكل أعمالي، أسعى لما ترضى، ماشي 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 بنور الله، 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 ماشي بنور الله ماشي، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول أستغفرك وأتوب عن كل عصيان يا رب، يا ما رحمت قلوب يا رب ترعاني يا رب، أستغفرك وأتوب عن كل عصيان يا رب، يا ما رحمت قلوب يا رب ترعاني يا رب، في رحمتك آية ومحبة وهداية، وفي كل شيء آياتي قلت على الله، ماشي 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 بنور الله، 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 ماشي بنور الله.
ماشي بنور الله ماشي، ماشي بنور الله ماشي، ماشي بنور الله ماشي، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب، أبقى بحسن رجاء زدني بحبك حب يا رب، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب، أبقى بحسن رجاء زدني بحبك حب يا رب، وبارك لي بعيالي وبصحتي وبمالي وبكل أعمالي، أسعى لما ترضى، ماشي 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 بنور الله، 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 ماشي بنور الله ماشي، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب، أستغفرك وأتوب عن كل عصيان يا رب، يا ما رحمت قلوب يا رب ترعاني يا رب، أستغفرك وأتوب عن كل عصيان يا رب، يا ما رحمت قلوب يا رب ترعاني يا رب، في رحمتك آية ومحبة وهداية، وفي كل شيء آيات قل تعالى الله، ماشي 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 بنور الله، 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 ماشي بنور الله. ماشي بنور الله ماشي، ماشي بنور الله ماشي، ماشي بنور الله ماشي، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب، ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب أبقى بحسن رجاء زدني بحبك حب يا رب ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب أبقى بحسن رجاء زدني بحبك حب يا رب وبارك لي بعيالي وبصحتي وبمالي وبكل أعمالي أسعى لما ترضى ماشي 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 بنور الله 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 ماشي ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب أستغفرك وأتوب عن كل عصيان يا رب يا ما رحمت قلوب يا رب ترعاني يا رب أستغفرك وأتوب عن كل عصيان يا رب يا ما رحمت قلوب يا رب ترعاني يا رب في رحمتك آية ومحبة وهداية وفي كل شيء آيات قل تعالى الله ماشي 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 بنور الله 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 ماشي ماشي بنور الله ماشي ماشي بنور الله ماشي ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب أبقى بحسن رجاء زدني بحبك حب يا رب مشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب يا رب أبقى بحسن وجاه زدني بحبك حب يا رب وبارك لي بعيالي وبصحتي وبمالي وبكل أعمالي أسعى لما ترضى ماشي 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 بنور الله 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 ماشي ماشي بنور الله أدعي وأقول يا رب أستغفرك وأتوب عن كل عصيان يا رب يا ما رحمت قلوب يا رب ترعاني يا رب أستغفرك وأتوب عن كل عصيان يا رب يا ما رحمت قلوب يا رب ترعاني يا رب في رحمتك آية ومحبة وهداية وفي كل شيء آيات قل تعالى الله ماشي 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 بنور الله 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 ماشي بنور الله
Okay, assalamu alaikum rahmatullah everyone. Hope you're doing fine, inshallah. This is Dr. Uthman Muhammad. I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm really happy to be here with you. Okay, assalamu alaikum rahmatullah everyone. Hope you're doing fine, inshallah. This is Dr. Uthman Muhammad. I'm a psychiatrist, and I'm really happy to be here with you. I hear my echo. Just a second. This is better. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm excited to talk about some of the things that might be pertinent to our situation right now. And usually when we have a lecture or talk, usually I'm checking in with people. I'm saying "Assalamu alaikum," how's everyone doing? I can see the faces, I can see the smiles or the lack thereof, and I can see who's in my audience. But inshallah, we'll try our best today to talk about certain things that might be relevant, so we can make use of our time, inshallah, and we can have some quality discussions, inshallah. So I'll start with talking about a few things that might be relevant to many of us, and if we feel that some of the things we're discussing are not relevant to you, that's perfectly fine. That's okay. I'm trying to paint with a bigger brush here. If there's any technical problems, let me know, and if you want me to raise my voice or lower my voice, let me know. But we'll take it from here, inshallah ta'ala. Can you guys hear me okay, by the way? Okay, so I'm going to go to PowerPoint here. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see my slides. Share screen. Okay. Entire screen. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears here and move to my my PowerPoint now. Okay, so the title of this discussion, coping with estrangement. Really, this is just a fancy word to say that these are strange times, and in those strange times, so we feel that we've become strangers to ourselves, strangers to the world, strangers to our family members, strangers to our usual habits. So how do you cope with that when you feel that things are not the usual, things are not the norm? And let me just take a step back here and say this is new for all of us. So I hope we all realize this idea that we're all in this together, and we're all trying to see what we can do to really circumvent any problems and to see how we can cope really with this new situation that we're in. It's a pandemic. Most of us were never there when the initial pandemic was there, like the Spanish flu, for example. But this is a new era, it's a new time. And when there are new challenges, this is a signal for us that we have to actually start thinking about newer, innovative, solutions and new ways of coping with this challenge. So I really want us to make this relevant, and please, if you have any questions that would make this more relevant, please let me know, inshallah, so we can go over some of this those important things. But just to put our social connectedness back into context, we need our social connectedness. It's not something we do for luxury. It's not something that we do just because they make us go to school, or because they the family members are making us socialize for some reason. So we socialize because it's really ingrained in our brains, and it is really ingrained in our existence as a species. Without getting too technical, but there are parts in the brain, in our brains, and I like to use science sometimes to help us understand things, that help us socialize, really. There's this mirror neuron revelation that we learned that you can activate your brain by doing things, or you can also activate the same parts of the brain, the exact same parts of the brain, by watching people do things as well. So if I watch someone eating a pizza, and I'm sorry you're fasting maybe today, but that's okay. You'll eat pizza if you want when it's iftar time. If you watch someone eat a pizza or drink coffee or whatever you like to do now, if you're not fasting, you actually activate certain parts of your brain. But if you go yourself and grab that cup of coffee or a latte or a piece of pizza, you activate the same exact parts of the brain. So this was a discovery that we learned working, with science, with apes. So what does that mean? It means that it seems that watching people and understanding behavior and observation of social cues and social context is really hardwired in our brains. So it is not something that is a surprise. Why are we not coping well with this? Well, because our brains are wired to connect that well, socially. We're built that way to connect socially. This is from a scientific standpoint. Even if you want to put things in a religious perspective, say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He's created us into nations so that we would know one another. إِنَّا خَلَقْنَاكُمْ مِنْ ذَكَرٍ وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا. So then, so we can know one another and get to meet each other. So lack of socialization, what does it do? It might affect the way how we feel. It might affect how we perceive ourselves. It might affect how we think about life. It might pose some existential questions. And for some of us more than others. So some of us who are quote unquote social butterflies, who really thrive off social interactions, who really thrive off being able to be in a bigger group, who are quote unquote the party. So these people might, find it a little more difficult to cope with this. Others might find it a little less problematic. We have to read ourselves and we have to understand where do we stand when it comes to this, social distancing, social isolation, kind of new game that we have right now. Pause, another question. So is this pandemic a blessing in disguise, or is it possible to be a blessing in disguise, or do I have to think about that as a blessing in disguise? There are people who are optimistic, who want to infuse optimism with everything. All right. Sometimes when it's not rational, sometimes when it's not really plausible, but they want to infuse optimism. This pandemic is a blessing. We will discover who is the true believer and who is not. Or people will say, "Oh, this is making us focus on ourselves, and this is crunch time." And if that works for you, alhamdulillah, great. But we shouldn't go and preach this way of thinking about this pandemic just because it's not very useful for most people, and it's really not natural to say that because, as we've described and said, we're not built that way. But we will learn today ways, inshallah ta'ala, to cope with this and to make use of it, inshallah, and to try our best to make it a blessing. If it's not feeling that way, to make it a blessing, inshallah. So needless to say, it is not a sign of weakness of your faith or character or psychology or stamina if you are struggling to cope right now. I just want to say it and put it out there because we're all in this together. We're all going through these difficult emotions and feelings. I was talking to my family, and we feel like we're stiff sometimes. Like I feel like I'm stiff because I'm not moving a lot. So we'll talk about that inshallah today as well. So I just want to put it out there that it is okay to struggle. It's okay to say this is weird, it's different, and we'll try our best inshallah to work this out inshallah. So some important psychological concepts might help us wrap our heads around what to do, right? Just because if you are left to be alone in the wilderness like that, when you're left to your own devices, it might be difficult to find your place in space, right? So having a roadmap is really, really important. You can go a long way if you know where you are in place in space, so you know where you're headed. So that's extremely important. So I'd like to put some so to speak, milestones. Some marks that can help us think about where we are right now and what can we do about where we are right now. And I just wanted to highlight a few concepts that are important to think about as we go along this lecture, but also after this. So for some of us who've been used to being workaholics, right? We've got accustomed to a certain lifestyle where we go into, the weekday, start on Monday, and then work, and then the weekends we rest, we recuperate, and then go back on Monday. For a lot of people, this is kind of the lifestyle. And many of us who are at baseline not feeling good. So we are struggling at baseline just because maybe we're sad or depressed or have a lot of anxiety. And we've used work to cope with this stress that we have. And that's okay. This is a good coping skill for you. This is great. Now, with this pandemic, a lot of people have been deprived of this coping strategy. A lot of people have been deprived of this, a breather, being able to kind of cope with anxiety by occupying ourselves, which is a great tool to keep ourselves busy and healthy and sane. So if you know from yourself that this is what I'm struggling with, and now this pandemic hits and I'm social distancing and I can't utilize this important coping strategy, then that means that I have to put the work somewhere else. That means that I'm going to have to invest in a positive way, not in a passive way, which means I have to be purposeful about it. I have to go out of my way to create a schedule that would make it feel like I'm working. And we'll talk about that, what that is in a few minutes as well. So that opens another important concept, which is distraction. Distraction is not necessarily something that is a waste of time, or it's not something that we talk about in a negative connotation. Distraction is a healthy coping strategy. Imagine if there was no pandemic, and if all of us lived in a universe where there is no job, no work, you stay there, and then you are left to your own thoughts and feelings the whole day. That's a lot of work to do. Just because we are all full of thoughts and worries and anxieties and all kinds of things that are percolating inside. Now, in Jannah, this is pleasurable because you are, a different person, so to speak, right? You don't have all these worries. These negative feelings will be, stripped away from you when you go to Jannah. But in this world, if you're left to think all day and feel all day, it might be, a little too much to do, right? So distraction really is important. And distraction could be recreational. So you distract yourself by playing maybe like a board game, or you go for a jog, or play with with the kids, or do something, or gardening. So you can do that to distract yourself, and that's very healthy. But it also could be functional. So going to work, for example, like I just said. So when distraction goes away, being a healthy coping strategy, many times we are left to what you call rumination and ruminating. What does it mean to ruminate? It means that you're sitting with your own thoughts and feelings, and like a hamster on a wheel, you're spinning all these thoughts and feelings in your head. And rumination is a little tempting. There is something seducing about rumination, because it gives you the mirage that you're going somewhere, but you're not. So like the hamster spinning a wheel, if we ruminate a lot, we feel that, maybe I'll get somewhere, but you'll find yourself, going in circles. So it is important to identify if we're ruminating a lot. If I have this issue of rumination, I really have to kind of pause and say, hey, this is not going anywhere. I'm just wearing myself out. I'm just exhausting myself. And really, I have to think about other things to do. Or maybe I have to distract myself or get other things done, because this rumination is not going anywhere. Hey, if this is me thinking about not being able to make ends meet, let me implement a different strategy, shura. Okay? Let me consult with someone who's an entrepreneur, for example, in the community, someone who knows how to read the market, someone who is skilled, someone who has a lot of stores who really, can hire me. So I have to not ruminate, and I have to plan my life, and I have to think about solutions that are problem focused. So I have to identify the problem and focus on how do I solve this problem. Okay, because rumination can take away, it can steal from your time and energy that you would need to actually, function well. So that leads us to another door, which is also important: the mental flexibility aspect. So what is that? So mental flexibility, or you can call it resilience if you want to call it in the kind of more fancy psychological terminology. Flexibility, mental flexibility and resilience is just denotes how quickly you can bounce back from a status quo and find a different route, right? So how quickly you can bounce back and start working on a different plan B or plan C. Okay, so this is where people with a lot of mental flexibility, it can be entrepreneurs, and you read about people who failed a lot and then succeeded. In our hospital, every time a COVID patient leaves the hospital well and they go home, we call it Code Rocky. So from the movie, the famous movie Rocky, where he goes and he's victorious, and there's this theatrical music, so we play that. So this guy, the actor, failed so many times in his life before this movie, but never gave up. So the mental flexibility of kind of pushing through and finding different routes and different pathways to get to what you need and what you want. Another important psychological concept is what is happening within our family dynamic. Okay, what does that mean? It means that every family is different than the other family. Okay, so you'll see people, doing a lot better, or people doing a lot less better during this pandemic, depending on how the family functions as a unit. Okay, what does that mean? It means that we've across the time, spending this time together, we've negotiated stuff. Maybe not consciously, but subconsciously. We've negotiated, like, who has this room, or who gets to sit on the couch first, or who watches this TV show, or who has precedence mowing the lawn. And not that everyone wants to mow the lawn, but whatever. So, but who does what in what time in what space? We've negotiated that, and then we've accomplished a way of navigating through this. And then this happens, and then this rocks our boat. This status quo, or this quarantine rocks our boats and kind of makes it difficult to maintain the same spaces that we negotiated before in the past. So I just want us to highlight this important concept so we understand what is happening at home and why there might be kind of a little more struggle. Why is it that we're not getting along as much? So that could be one of the reasons. Also, we find ourselves, when we're in a situation like this, we find ourselves asking more difficult questions now. And again, I just want, if there are teenagers there listening to me, or younger kids, please bear with me. We'll get to the fun part, after this. I know we're talking about like adult stuff and relationships and things like that, but this is also something that is relevant to you as well. So it's important to actually keep those in mind. Okay. So as you are quarantined, or you're social distancing, you're with your family, let's say you're a spouse, your husband, wife, etc. How close are we in this relationship? Some people have negotiated their distance. I'm not comfortable sitting with my spouse the whole day like that. And this is not weird, and this is not wrong. This is how you built up your relationship like that. Okay. But now you are made closer. You are kind of being tasked with being too close together. Okay. So it is not something that is frowned upon to actually kind of ask for space if you need that space. Okay. So I just want to kind of highlight that aspect. And then you can ask more questions that can be a little more kind of troubling as well. How do we manage each other now that we're so close in this relationship? And I'll talk about some important concepts as we move along as well. And how do I negotiate space again? and how do I advocate for more space, and what conversations can I have around this space question. Would that affect my relationship? So let's say I negotiated this space and I wanted more space because things are getting a little tight for me, getting a little suffocated. Would this affect my relationship? So if we ask ourselves those questions and we answer them in a compassionate way, which I'll talk about right now, that can go a long way. So to answer those questions and to kind of try to address those concerns, there are a few things we can do. Okay. And I'll try to make it practical so we can actually leave this discussion today with some practical tips, inshallah. So some coping strategies that might be relevant. And again, this is not prescriptive. This is not a prescription for everyone. It's a prescription for some people listening to this who might be able to find it to be helpful. If you find that this is not relevant, please don't accuse yourself. Please don't be harsh on yourself. I'm trying my best to kind of have a bigger umbrella kind of discussion. But definitely, if you have your own personal circumstance, think about your personal circumstance, think about what makes you strong, what makes you resilient, and tap into that and see if you can use your previous successes in the past to them so you can survive this this. So the first thing is communication, and you've heard this before. Your mom, your grandma, everyone says communication, 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 right? But what is it about this communication? So it's important to verbalize your needs and wants in a way that is not laden with a surge of feelings. So you want to state the facts, and you want to be able to make your point come across, but without loading it with feelings, because that might actually result in a little more conflict. So, for example, if you're not used to be so close to someone, there is no need to say things like "you're suffocating me," or "I feel suffocated," or "this is suffocating." So, this charged word might stir more trouble. But it's important to also express yourself. So you're not saying, "Oh, I'm having a blast. I'm having the life of my time. This is awesome. This is great." You don't have to do that either. Okay. So you can communicate your needs in a clear way, and you can say, "I'm not used for being so close. I know it's weird, but I need some space." It's things like that. Okay. Use gentle language like that. That is accurate and that is specific. Or things like, "I need some me time, personal time." Or, "Can we take turns and keep the kids busy?" If you have kids together, if you're a couple. The other thing that is important is the space, the management of spaces. Okay. Now, I've been reading some studies recently on how communities are coping with the COVID pandemic, and people who are interested in urban planning, sociologists, are talking about how our urbanized life needs revamping. Just to be discovered now, and I live in a little suburb here. I could walk if I wanted to, but I lived in the city in the past where I could not take a walk if I wanted to. So the management of spaces, as we think about where we are emotionally, it's important to talk about where we are also physically. Okay, so we need to create spaces if this is not available outside from within, inside our houses. How do you do that? You think about maybe the furniture. Maybe I can rearrange the furniture in a different way. Maybe I can make some space designated for exercise. People in Ramadan have built their own mini masjids in their houses. You can also make your own mini gym, if you will, or exercise space, or the same space for the masjid. You can do like the Sahaba did and use it for exercise. But change the scene at home. Get some flowers, get some plants, and take care of them. So that goes a long way, arranging the space that we are, residing within. The other thing you can use is fun and humor. Okay, and this is my favorite one. Especially if you have kids, especially if if things are getting boring, play board games. Make cheesy jokes. It's okay. Wallah, it's okay. Make cheesy jokes that are silly. And get a laugh of that. And there are websites for that. I use those websites when I'm trying to a little break the ice with the kids in my office if I'm having a hard time with that. But I won't say any jokes today. But you can Google them yourself. especially with kids. And when kids are sleeping, invest in your intimacy. If you have a lot of downtime for that, so see if you can invest in your intimacy if you're in a relationship or you're married. And most importantly, we need to see the forest, not the tree, when there is a situation going on at home. Okay, so there will be frustration, there will be angst, there will be irritability, there will be anger. But what is this all about, really? So it's important to kind of develop a sixth sense as what is really going on here. Why is this anger and angst? What is happening? And if you've watched this classic movie, Phantom Thread, there's this little scene where they fight over asparagus, but it's not really about the asparagus. It's about something else. So is this about the asparagus? What is this about? So when things are going down at home, just remember that, what is this all about? Maybe it's about something that we're not talking about here. And it's important to talk about it then. And how do we talk about it? We communicate, as we described, in an accurate way, in a healthy way, without charging our words with heavy stuff. Suffocated. You're suffocating. All right. And then we should acknowledge that the struggle is real. Okay. So what does that mean? It means that we should build empathy on both sides, right? And we should acknowledge that these are not easy times. So no use of saying things like you're exaggerating it or you're being so dramatic. No, it's not dramatic. It's not exaggeration. These are difficult times. So the struggle is real. If we acknowledge this fact and accept it and believe in it, maybe we'll have a little more and more patience for each other, inshallah. Okay. And then this is really important, okay? And maybe second most important for me. I'll tell you which one is the first important one for me and the most beloved after humor. Think about, the other person. I know we're built to think about ourselves, but during these times, think about the other person. Think about how can I make him happy? How can I make her happy? How can I support this person? How can I support my kids? They're cranky. How can I make them less cranky? How do I change it for them? So if we all take care of each other, then we'll all be taken care of. Think about it that way. And then sleep. Oh my God, sleep. Ramadan, iftar, tarawih, suhoor. All the times are jumbled up now, so it's going to be a little difficult for us to regulate our sleep if you are observing the fasting. But definitely stay on the course of your sleep habits. Don't mess those up, especially if you have children at home. Children have their own kind of sleeping needs. If you're, as an adult, your sleeping is all over the place, then your biological clock is going to be in shambles, right? Because kids will wake up early in the day, they're ready to go, and you're still sleeping, exhausted. You've had 2 cups of latte, and then you're wired and you just can't sleep now. So what do you do that? That's an issue. So try your best to get a good hour, 6 hours of sleep, 7 hours of sleep as much as possible. Now, this is my favorite one. Okay, this is not forever. Okay, this too shall pass. Memorize it, repeat it, write it down, put it on the fridge, put it everywhere you can, in your house. Make it a screensaver, paint it. It's not forever. What does that mean? It means that I should have hope that things will change. They will change. They will get better. But also, and here's a good one: don't make permanent, unnecessary big decisions in this transitional time. Okay, so I'm not talking about finding a different job because you can't make ends meet. I'm not talking about what else you can do in terms of thinking about college if your college is change their plans. I'm not talking about these important things. I'm talking about things like relationships, or moving to a different city, because all these things can be expensive and consuming emotionally and financially. So don't make big decisions based on this transitional time we're in. Try your best to stay put until this is over, so you can make a more rational, more sound decision. Now, this might be a little gendered, so I do apologize for if this is not for you. But for many traditional families, nuclear families, there is the mother taking care of the household, and she's the primary caregiver, and she might have a job or not. And then the father is is the breadwinner. But this is not the kind of the normative. I don't want to make it sound like this is a normative, because other families are not like that. Okay, so I apologize if it does come across as gender a little bit. But secondary caregivers, so Many times it's the father. But if it's not, again, it can be you also, mom. It might be a challenge to find stamina to be patient with playing with the kids for long hours. Okay, it might be a little of a struggle to actually find, the bandwidth to change diapers or run around, or I don't want this cookie, I want that cookie. If it's getting too much, it's okay. Just pace yourself, take a break. Okay, don't take 6 hour breaks, because this is too long. You need to take care of the other person as well, right? You want to work as a unit, as a family, right? So try your best to take a little break. Say, I need a break, and then come back and help. Okay, it's okay to take a short break and then come back, and you'll find that it rejuvenates you. Taking a little break can rejuvenate you, and you can go back and be helpful. And then the primary caregiver, and again, it might, for many families, it's the wife, the mom. If it's the other way around, if the dad is the primary caregiver, that could be also what's going on. But if you are finding that the secondary caregiver, who usually is outside the house earning a living and not taking care of the household and the family and the kids, if you find that their presence is becoming a nuisance or a burden, you should ask yourself, why is this the case? Why? Am I expecting more help that I'm not getting, for example? Am I expecting more support? And then what else can I do about that? Again, communication, right? So things like you're not helpful, or I'm not sure why you're here, or what is this all about, or I could do this without you. Things like that, you've guessed, is a no-no, right? It's not very helpful to say that. So what do you do? You choose your battles as well. So you communicate effectively. Please help me with this, help me with that. Or give choices. Would you like to help me with this or help me with that? That's always a good strategy, to give choices. But also pick your battles, okay? If you want more help in a lot of different things, pick the ones that are not going to disrupt the routine for the family, especially for the kids if you have kids, okay? So there's a specific time where, kids go to school, where kids have breakfast, kids go to sleep, they have a bedtime story. So there are the things that are not disruptive for kids' routines. Try to stick with those as much as possible, and then use the help with other things. Okay, so like prepping breakfast, for example, or taking the kids for a walk, for example, or doing some other kind of games of distraction, for example. Because kids love the routines. So if you have a specific routine that you've kind of played out that worked for the family, try to stick with that as much as possible. Now, what I'll do here, I'm going to go ahead and switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to go to a few resources that might be helpful for younger folks, older and younger, but for the most part, a lot of younger kids. And then I have a few questions that I would like to address today as well. So let me just stop sharing here for a second. There you go. All right. So the American Academy of Child Psychiatry, American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, which is ACAP, has a list of nice resources that you can tap into and read about. Things you can print out, different websites you can actually use to kind of have fun with the family, and so you can have a look at that. And it can be overwhelming. I know that they build these resources to help families because families are overwhelmed, but the immensity of these resources is overwhelming. So try to pace yourself. Pick a thing or two that you might think is relevant for your family. But my personal favorites here are museums. Okay, so and zoos. So activities for kids here. If you can scroll down and you just go to Google. I think you can see my screen, but if you Google ACAP, AACAP, and just write resources for helping kids COVID. If you just do that, it will pop up. This page will pop up in front of you. Okay, and then you can scroll down and see all these nice resources. But here are some interesting things that you might actually like. Here's a really fancy one here. So you can go to the museum, actually. People who are artsy and interested in culture, or curious people who are hoping to build their education. You could go to a museum, and this is the British Museum in London. Okay, you go to virtual tour and check this out. This is really fancy stuff. Check this out. Boom. There we go. So this is really a mapping of our human existence, really. And you can scroll up and down, and this is so interesting. Look at that. You can go back in time, and this is 1,000 before Christ, right? And then you can go all the way up, and you can check, what happened, how was culture back then, right? And you can look at what different, parts of the world had back then. So this is 600 after AD. Let's see what was going on. So this is in Korea. Interesting. And this is what's happening in Africa. You can see some artifacts from Africa. And this is really fascinating. You can sort out how these things are connected, but it's beautiful. So this is something you can do. For people who don't want this headache, what you can do is you can go to the zoo. So I'm going to just X out of this. And this is British Museum with google.com. So you can spend a whole time, just visiting a culture at a time. And every day you can just visit one of those dots and spend some time watching that or learning about it. And a lot of kids I know will love this. So we'll just X this one. But also there is, you can go to the zoo. Let's go to the zoo and do like the monkeys do. The kids love these songs and they love these, watching animals. So the San Diego Zoo, zoo.sandiegozoo.org, has live cams. So I'm not sure what's your favorite animal, but I think the pandas are not live just because they try to protect the pandas from intrusive, footage and things like that. But here's a polar bear. Let's see what the polar bear is about or what they're up to. There you go. Here's a polar bear, live from San Diego Zoo. Just there chilling. It's amazing. So you can do that, and you can just watch that for hours. I know I can watch this for hours. And here's another one coming out of the pond here. Beautiful. Yeah, so you can do that. And do they have a beluga whale here? Because they're my favorite. I don't see a beluga whale here. Anyways, well, but you can pick whatever you want, and then you can watch that, and kids love that. So these are resources of things that you can do online, but there are other things you can do if you go to this ACAP website. That you can go to the Great Wall of China if you're into walls, in a good way, not the other walls that people build. But if you like, to go sightseeing, if you have time for that, you might want to just leave the whole afternoon open, just because it's going to take a while to go to the virtual tour to the Great Wall of China. So see if you want to do that. But there are other resources that you can actually tap into, and there are things that you can do that are not, screen based. So screenless activities for kids. There's a resource here. It says screenless activities. So it has a lot of arts and crafts. You can do that. So let me just take a step back here and just say something really important. A lot of us are trying to wing it. A lot of us are trying to see if we can do this by ourselves. A lot of us are trying to see that maybe I can tap into the things I've learned from my experience as a parent, things I learned as a kid, and then maybe I can use those this knowledge base to actually be helpful. But this is a good time to actually ask for help. Okay, regardless of how much regardless of how much you've been able to invest and learn about what would be helpful for kids, we just can't do it by ourselves like that. We just can't. We don't have all these resources to keep our kids busy for that long. So what we have to do is we have to ask for help. And for many parents who have younger kids, it might be a struggle to actually have the energy to do all these things. Like, where do I get this energy from to actually do all these arts and crafts and go to the zoo or talk talk about the the panda bears, or talk about the beluga whales. I don't see a beluga whale camera here, but if there was a beluga whale camera, so what do I do? Where do I get this energy from? So here's an important tip for leaders in the community. So if you are a group, youth leader for the community, this is where it's important to hold a session about how to take care of younger kids who are bored at home. So activities, have a Zoom with activities for kids for like 3 hours, 2 hours, just because some of these activities can happen as in a group setting, and you can do things in a gathering, so that can be actually quite helpful. So so maybe what I'll do is I'll stop here, and then I'll see if anyone has a question. Maybe inshallah we can ask the questions and try to answer them. All right, so let's see here. All right. Okay, so I see a question here, and so I got a question from someone who's a medical student, and they're asking, and I'm getting also questions here. Let me just streamline the questions just a second. Okay. Address some tips to those who are living alone, away from family. Those who are feeling lonely or facing mental health issues. Well, yeah. Okay. So yes. So the medical student who was asking a question about the stress they're facing. Really, this is it is very stressful. And also, if you're a medical student and you're being tasked with going to the hospital and seeing sick patients, or having to work with COVID patients, or you're actually doing a lot of the care for the community. If you're doing that, then yes, that will be even more stressful for you. So what do? So if the stress is not manageable, if you're really struggling, it's a nice hint to talk to your supervisor. Okay, so in my hospital as a psychiatrist, we are in our department of psychiatry, we're offering counseling to our colleagues. Okay, so we go to the hospital a few times a week, and we go talk to nurses, we talk to ICU and MICU doctors to provide the support that they need. Okay, again, this is not the time to wing it. This is not the time to say, maybe I'll manage, maybe not. If you are feeling the brunt of this, and you have all the right to feel the brunt of this, please do ask for help, especially with medical students, medical school. Nobody's going to make an assumption that you're not good enough of a doctor. I hope no one would do, because that's not good, clinical judgment or education. I work in an educational institution, so I work with medical students, with residents. I'm an assistant professor of psychiatry. So I work in the education process, and if someone comes to me saying they're struggling, I would definitely understand. I would help them. It's not going to make you less of a doctor if you ask for help. So please, if you feel that things are going out of hand, it's too stressful, see if you can seek the counsel. Talk to your supervisor, talk to your advisor, see if you can get some help if you need that. Now, if you're not feeling the brunt as bad, if not as stressed out, you're just stressed, but not too badly. Self-care goes a long way, and then by self-care, I mean what we've talked about in terms of physical well-being as well. It's not just the psychological kind of games that we play with ourselves, but also the physical aspect of our bodies. So if you are not one who would exercise, it is time to exercise. I'm not sure if you can see that here, but there are bands here that I use. These are stretch bands I use for exercise. And there's a kettlebell here that I can't carry because it's too heavy, but I do squats with it. And I've gotten into this recently because I needed some exercise that I can do at home, and it's important to actually invest in this important concept of the physical well-being and taking care of myself. So when you exercise, it's not just the labor you're putting. It's not just the amount of calories you're shedding. It's also sending a strong message of self-care and self-love. Okay, so self-love and self-care, two important concepts to keep in mind as we go of this, on this beautiful journey of life in general, but during those times of difficulty as well. So self-care, self-love, watch what I'm eating, watch what I'm drinking. I'm not drinking a lot of soda. I'm eating healthy food. I'm doing all the pizza and the coffee of the world. So balance out what we're doing in terms of our diets, and definitely involve certain level of exercise to take care of yourself and your body. In Ramadan, I know it's not easy. It's been difficult for all of us, and I've been lazy myself to exercise as well. A lot of times. But see if you can wither this. The time Ramadan is almost over, so we have about a week left of Ramadan. But see if you can, use the time after Ramadan to recuperate, rejuvenate, and take care of yourself or your body. I think that goes a long way. If you are developing signs and symptoms of depression, so I've got a few questions here about what to do. People are predisposed. People who've been struggling with depression and anxiety before this pandemic, and now they're not doing great. So it's time to reconnect with your caregivers. Okay. So if you have depression and anxiety, if you have a therapist, time to go back to my therapist. If you are prescribed psychiatric medications, time to get those refills, back, on board on the shelf. So self-care goes a long way if you're able to manage stress to a certain extent. Okay, so if the stress I'm facing is not affecting my function, okay, so I'm functioning, I'm stressed, but I'm functioning, okay, and if it's not intense, if it's not too bad, if it's not frequent, if it's not every day, and if it's not making me question, my worth, my life, what is this all about? Is this even worth it? If it's not calling all these things, then yes, you can manage it by yourself. You can, do self-care. But if it is getting more intense, if it is getting more frequent, if you are getting more depressed, if you're getting panic attacks, if you're getting more anxious, so if it's going out of hand, we have to kind of pause here a little bit and say, I need to talk to someone who's an expert to help me out, sort this out, right? So it's important. I can't highlight this enough. If you are feeling that things are going out of hand, go seek, expert opinion. Go seek professional help. It's important. Nobody's going to judge you for that. And especially if you're a medical student in the medical field. I hope this answers your question, inshallah. My future colleague who asked this question from medical school. Also, how do we structure our days, our kids' days? Like I said, initially, it's important. Kids love routine, okay? But kids also, they like playing games too, and they are good with mental warfare. They'll mess up with your head. They'll try to say, yes, but this is not school, right? This is not school. This is something else now. Why do I have to wake up in the morning? Why do I have... So they'll try to kind of conquer you with these questions, but you will not submit just because you're the parent. And you'll say, yes, it is still school. This is not summertime yet. We still have to wake up in the morning. We still have to go through the same motions every single day because it's school, but it's a different kind of school. It's school but it's a different kind of studying just because of what's happening here. So you want to stick to the routine as much as possible. And then screen time, okay? So for some parents are more savvy than other parents, but if you feel that it's going out of hand, if you feel that one time they're doing their homework, other time they're on video games or playing games online, so there are ways to kind of control that. There are ways to kind of put restriction on what they can open, what kind of websites they can open. So see if you don't want to do that. And also, if you are struggling with, how many hours of video games they should play, for example, it's important to highlight that they would earn video game time when they are done with their schoolwork. Okay, I know it's very tempting to say that it's all kind of jumbled up now, and there is no kind of classes, there is nothing like that. But you want to create a structure as much as possible to keep things flowing as though you were going still to school, as though you were still going, through the school year as, business as usual. See if you can do that, okay? And then if you are having glitches with that, seek the counsel of other parents who are able to do it, okay? This is not the time to kind of hide our skills from other people, and it's not the time to feel shy to ask for help, No one is born a great parent like that in their genes like that, right? Everyone learns how to become a good parent, right? And then if you have younger kids and you're learning how to become a parent, use the consult of someone who's raised generations before that is still a little relevant, okay? See if you can ask the counsel of someone if you have a 4 or 5 year old child or a 10-year-old child and someone has an older teenager, how you can work around things and they can help you out. So seek the counsel. If the ISBCC would like to do that, what you can do is you can have a parent support group. So you can start this group. It costs nothing. It's very helpful. It's convenient. It's a great act of charity and thawab to actually get together as a community and use a shura so we can understand how we can help each other better, inshallah. Okay, so so that answers this question. Any resources for those who are feeling lonely or facing mental health issues alone? Yes. So so if you, like I said, if you are having struggles to cope with depression and anxiety, if you have mental health problems, you need to ask the experts. You need to get connected with services. So I'm not sure if at the ISBCC there is still this mental health effort going on. We had a clinic a while back, but you can actually ask your primary care doctor, your PCP. So your primary care doctor, and that's usually most people have primary care doctors. Okay, you can start there and say, hey, I'm looking for a therapist to help me, with my mental health situation. Can you help me out, please? So your primary care doctor can help you navigate this, and you can actually get some help. If your child is struggling, if your kid is not doing great and they're having bigger temper tantrums, things are going out of hand, if you have kids on the spectrum, if you have kids with ADHD, if you have kids with generalized anxiety who are worried about leaving the house now, if it's going out of hand when previously it was doing okay, you can ask your primary care in the state of Massachusetts to connect you with a program called MCPAP. MCPAP, MCPAP, MCPAP. MCPAP is a psychological support network for primary care doctors, from psychiatrists and psychologists and therapists. Will see your child for a consult, maybe once or twice, to help the primary care doctor take better care of you, and also to help you navigate this and tell you where to go after that. Okay, and the MCPAP also for your child, if you have kids, can give you resources where you live. So if you live somewhere, I don't know, Woburn, Mass, and then you don't know who are the therapists there, the primary care can call MCPAP and get you some names and numbers. Okay. If out of a college, university, then most campuses have an adjustment counselor, so to speak, or some counselor who would work with you, help you out. So you can ask for help from that specific office if you would like. So these are some resources in the community. Other things you can do is you can go online and write Psychology Today, and then you can filter through zip code and preference of what you're looking for in a therapist or a psychologist or a doctor, and then it'll give you a list of people who are around you. Okay. So these are some resources you can tap into if you want. I got a long question here. I'm trying to see if I can. Alrighty. Importance of exercise. We have virtual exercise at Wellness Way, sisters. So that's awesome. Alhamdulillah. So I hope everyone can see that. So you can text the number 860-740-2155. And this is a group exercise. This is a gem. I'm really happy to see that. I wasn't aware of this activity. So please make use of this great resource. The brothers, you need to step up your game. Maybe you'll have your own group, maybe, inshallah, at the masjid as well. So this is great. That's a great resource. Excellent. Okay. So another question is, people are living alone, away from family, single adults, people who are stranded. This is probably going to be more difficult for them, and we have to be honest about that. And this would actually take a more personalized it all should be personalized. I think all the measures should be personalized, but especially for this population, if you are stranded, if you are by yourself, if you're an adult away from your family, whether you're in medical school or otherwise, there's an urgent need for what I described earlier as self-love and self-care. Okay, so as a concept, self-love and self-care might sound a little selfish for a lot of people, and might sound a waste of time, especially if you are a social butterfly who feels now stranded. If you get your energy from people, if this is where you get your vibe, if people are, social gatherings are your element, it's you're in your zone when you're there. This will take a little more thinking for you, and this would require a more elaborate plan to deal with this pandemic. So I can relate to that personally. In different phase of my life, where I was felt kind of stranded, etc., etc. But I can tell you that self-love and self-care goes a long way. And then what follows is you might want to write down what kind of things you're at, your strengths. Write them down. So that's the first column. Okay. Write down what you're grateful for. Things that you're grateful for in your life. Write this down as well. And then write down what plans you have for the future for yourself. Okay. And then using the positive energy of the things you're grateful for, think about how you can make use of the things you're good at to get to the things that you want for yourself for the future. See if you can invest in this triad, what you're grateful for. So I'll give you a practical example. We're grateful for the fact that we have this conference and we can talk to each other, like if you can Zoom, for example, or Skype. We should be grateful for that, just because it allows us to act and really connect. It's not as much as we'd like, but we can connect. Or be grateful for the things that are already there for you. So you can if you're able to eat, so these basic things that we forget that we should be grateful for are important to actually highlight and think about. And if you can see my board here, you can actually see what kind of things I'm good for in my life. Okay, so I use that myself just because it goes a long way, and I look at that every time I forget. Every time I forget, I look at it and I just remind myself, I am grateful, alhamdulillah, but I'm forgetting a lot. So I have to remind myself actively the things I'm grateful for. Okay, and I have to summon this positive energy to actually plan ahead for the things I want for myself. So if I have health goals, I'm using this energy, and the fact that I know, for example, one of my strengths, for example, is persistence. I can be persistent on something, I can get it done, for example. I'm going to use that to get to my goals of building muscles or feeling good. You don't have to bulk up like that. You just have to feel good and just like the fact that you take care of yourself. Or reading a book, or finishing a season. That's okay. That's okay if that's what makes you feel good, as long as it's permissible, as long as you're not getting addicted to it, as long as you're not in front of the TV screen the whole day. If you are using your time wisely, see what goals you want to achieve for yourself, and then, but this is gonna have to be personalized. Okay. And I can't overemphasize how important it is for your strengths if you are stranded alone, right? You can tell, such as when the when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. Okay. And remind yourself that no one understands the meaning of being alone and stranded like that but me. Okay, Allah knows as well. But me will take care of me, and that has to kick in. That resilience, that strength of self-care, of fortitude, of looking at the future and keeping your eyes on the prize. When that kicks in, you'll see a difference, inshallah. And we'll make dua for you, inshallah. If you are stranded by yourself, inshallah, we'll make dua for you. But remember, this is not going to be forever. Inshallah, this will end soon, inshallah. Okay, so I think we're putting on the screen now health@isbcc.org. You can visit that resource if you are looking for mental health support. A Bannister at ICNARelief.org. You call the number for Ummah Health for free counseling. That's amazing. Alhamdulillah, this service is still there, so that's good. Yeah, so reach out. It's great that this resource is available for us, so we can, alhamdulillah, tap into this. Yeah, so I think I answered this question. What resources you recommend to those who feel lonely? Yes. Yeah, again, so you can call this number. You can reach out, ask for help if you think, your mental health is not in great shape. Yes, please do. You can see it in front of you on the screen. And this is an act of self-care and self-love. Reaching out and asking for support and help is an act of self-care and self-love. Say that enough. Okay. Let me see here. I think we've answered most of this. Let me see if anything here is on my phone. Okay. So I think we'll wrap it up for now, inshallah. Please don't hesitate to ask for help if you need the help. And I hope this was helpful. And inshallah, if need be, we can have more sessions for the future to support each other, inshallah. And inshallah, hopefully we'll meet people, in person as soon as possible. And inshallah, we'll meet in other different capacities and different events, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair for being here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Uthman Muhammad again. Take care, inshallah, and see you all soon. Assalamu alaikum.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على حي على الفلاح. حي على الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رضي الله تعالى عنهم وعن كافة المؤمنين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, welcome back for another evening of Quranic reflection as we discuss the 25th part of the Quran, Juz 25 of the Quran. Juz 25, brothers and sisters, contains 5 chapters or 4 chapters actually of the Quran. It contains, number 1, chapter 42 of the Quran, which is called the chapter of consultation, or Ashura, Surah Ashura. So that's chapter 42. This is the first part of Juz 25. And then after that is Surah Zukhruf. And Surah Zukhruf is chapter 43. And it talks, and Zukhruf means gold ornaments, gold decorations. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Surah Zukhruf, a very, very profound chapter. And then chapter 44, brothers and sisters, is about Dukhan. Dukhan means smoke, essentially, smoke. And then finally, chapter 45 of the Quran, Surah Al-Jathiyah. And Surah Al-Jathiyah is a very, very strong, scary, powerful chapter of the Quran. It talks about those that are on their knees, those that are on their knees. So let us begin with these 4 chapters. The first one, Shura, the second one, Zukhruf, the third one, Dukhan, smoke, and the fourth one, Jathiyah, on their knees. Ashura. Chapter 42 of the Quran talks about, it's called Ashura, this chapter on consultation, and it's named after the passage in the Quran in this chapter, or the reference for the one of the defining characteristics of the community of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is consultation. Wa amruhum shura bainahum, Allah Ta'ala says, describing the community of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that means he says to Baraka wa Ta'ala that that we take the community of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam always resorts to consultation to decide their affairs. And this factor of consultation, this quality of shura that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala designates as one of the defining characteristics of the Prophet's community, is very important, because it highlights the importance of persuasive argument as a preference to the community of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that when we deal with truth, when we debate in truth, when we try to find the right thing to do, when we try to exert all of our energy and our resources to do what's just, then we do that through persuasive argumentation, not through force, not through compulsion, not through making people and forcing people to come to terms with our way, but through shura. And in our search for truth, it's done with consultation. So this should be a defining characteristic as it relates to how the Muslims get things done, how we get things done in our homes, through consultation. That means husbands and wives consult with each other. Husbands don't have secrets that they don't tell their wives, and wives don't have secrets they don't tell their husbands. Families consult, communities consult, organizations that are run by Muslims consult each other. Governments consult members of each other. We have consultative bodies, and the governments consult their people, their community members. And so this is outlined as a defining characteristic of the community. Early in the Quran, Allah talks about a defining characteristic as justice, standing up for what's right, etc. But so we tend to highlight that aspect of the community, but we tend to forget the importance of consultation and shura. So chapter 42 of the Quran is a chapter that reminds us of this part, of this core characteristic of the community of the Prophet ﷺ, because it relates to the other competing dynamic of humanity that is a problem, actually, and that is the human being's tendency to be divisive, the human being's tendency to create division and disharmony and discord, and particularly with previous communities' tendency to create division and divisiveness and discord in matters of faith, in matters of religion. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in this chapter his wisdom and Allah Ta'ala being the final determining factor, and how the community of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam does what they can to discover the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of our states and actions and in our circumstances, and to consult with each other so that truth can emerge from us. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is reminded in that light that because we are a consultative community, that the Prophet ﷺ is reminded that he should not ﷺ compel people to believe. Just simply convey the message and that's it. There is no compulsion in religion. La ikraha fi din is a verse early, way back in chapter 2, and I believe it's the 3rd juz of the Quran, early on that verse, that there's no compulsion in religion. So now we come full circle with the Prophet ﷺ was told, don't compel, he can't compel people to truth, and the signature of his community is that we are a consultative community who is based in the art of persuasion and not in brute force and trying to compel people. What is really important also as a takeaway, brothers and sisters, in this chapter, chapter 42, is verse 11. And if there were ever a verse that you should commit to memory, verse 11 is that verse. Laysa kamithlihi shay is the verse. Wa huwa as-sami'ul basir. Chapter 42, verse 11. I had to memorize this a long time ago when I was in college, when I attended my first halaqah when I was a sophomore, back at Georgia State University in Atlanta. And never forget, my first teacher drilled into us this verse. He used to say, memorize it, 42:11, 42:11, 42:11. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says there's nothing like Allah. There is absolutely nothing like Allah. And if you get this down, the fact that there is nothing like Allah, if you understand that, then you will never be guilty of associating partners with Allah. And so I'm going to tell you the same thing. Get that down. 42:11. Allah says that there's nothing like Allah. Laysa kamithlihi shay. Anything that comes to our mind, Allah is different from that, because everything that comes to our mind has a reference in creation. And therefore, the statement that there's nothing like Allah is the declaration that there is nothing in the created realm like Allah. That anything we think of, anything that we can conceptualize or contemplate, that has a similarity or a reference somewhere else, and Allah has no reference point. And therefore, this verse, Laysa kamithlihi shay, is very important. There's nothing like him. Wa huwa as-sami'ul basir. He is the all-hearing and the all-seeing. And indeed, in the created realm, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, whether it's seen or unseen. There is nothing that is all-hearing nor all-seeing. So therefore, this verse 42:11 is the paradigmatic verse to guard us against associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the paradigmatic verse for truth about how we think about Allah. Allah ta'ala describes his wisdom in this chapter, and that he describes how he provides for us in wealth and in rain, and in how the earth is laid out for us. He describes how he gives people children, he gives people, sons and daughters, and then combinations, and he allows for people to have spouses, but then leaves some people single and leaves some people without children, who are unable to, who are infertile. So Allah, the diversity of Allah Ta'ala's creation is not because there are multiple gods, but because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a wisdom in the way that he does things, right? And Allah guides people in certain ways. So this is the content of chapter 42, which is our introduction to the juz. And then we are taken into chapter 43, Surah Al-Zukhruf, the chapter about gold ornaments. Now, why in the world would there be a chapter in the Quran, in this juz particularly, about gold ornaments? Well, simply put, the theme of this chapter is about Allah's refutation of the claim that was made by the Arab polytheists in Mecca, that Allah should have sent a prophet that was wealthy, that Allah should have sent a prophet that was from the elite, the financial elite of his community, both, and not only the financial elite in Mecca, but also the part of, and he should have had ties to the financial elite in Ta'if, which at that time was a major rival sister city of Mecca. And that, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala refutes this claim that a prophet should be wealthy or a prophet should be rich as a sign and a symbol of the people that they should follow that prophet. And the second refutation in this surah, in this chapter, is that Allah refutes the idea that the angels are God's daughters, are his daughters, and he refutes the idea that, or the claim that Jesus, Prophet Isa alayhi salam, is his son. So these were all kinds of claims, outrageous and erroneous claims that were made, that were circulating at the time of Mecca, in the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this chapter, Zukhruf, is a refutation of that. And this was all about the fact that the elite in Mecca and who were connected to the elite in Ta'if, they were they saw that greatness, they saw that greatness was defined by material wealth, and that material wealth was a sign that God loved them, that Allah loved them. Right? So the more wealth you have, the more great you were, and that meant that Allah loved you. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this chapter about gold ornaments flips that whole narrative, right? And he inverts this claim completely. And so, what's really powerful, there's a couple of things in this chapter, so much here. This chapter is so rich with metaphors and powerful reminders. So the first thing is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the fact that, not only does wealth not define where Allah's love is, but how dare people think that they can read Allah's mercy and his blessings through the lens of productivity and wealth and material success. How dare they make a claim that if some have and others have not, that this means that those that have are closer to God and those that have are not? Or they say that if God really loves someone, if Allah really loves someone, then why didn't Allah Ta'ala give that person, gold ornaments? And Allah quotes Fir'aun as well, Pharaoh, in this chapter, as making the exact same argument to his people about Musa. He quotes Fir'aun as saying, who has the gold? If God loved Moses, why didn't he embellish Moses with gold bracelets and send, all these angels down? Where's Moses's gold? Where's his control over things, right? So this idea that the glitter and the shininess has to be associated with divine blessing is rejected and debunked in this chapter. One of the most strongest verses in this chapter is chapter 32. Verse 32, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ahum yaqsimuna rahmatu rabbik. Do they want to distribute and disperse and to apportion out the mercy of Allah Ta'ala? Who has what? Would people like, would the Meccans like to try that out? Do the Meccans have any ability to divide up Allah's kingdom and the mercy of Allah Ta'ala? And then Allah says, "Nahnu qasamna ma'ishatahum fil hayati dunya." In this verse 32, He says, "We are the ones that apportion out and divide who gets what in this world. وَرَفَعْنَا بَعْدَهُمْ فَوْقَ بَعْدِ دَرَجَاتٍ." And we lift and elevate some people over others in various ways. Right? So some people have more money and some don't. Some people have more intellect and some don't. Some people have more strength and some don't. Some people have better health and some don't. Some people have more guidance and more insight and more wisdom and some don't. And so Allah Ta'ala says there are these disparities within the human race, and that's for a reason. Allah Ta'ala says, لِيَتَّخِذَ بَعْدُهُمْ لِبَعْدٍ سُخْرِيًّا, so that each party in the relationship may derive benefits from the other. So those that have more than others may employ those that have less, and they may distribute the wealth, and those that are employed may increase the productivity of the workers of the business, for example. And those that have guidance can teach that guidance and share that guidance, and those that are hungry for guidance can benefit and can pass that guidance on, for example. And those that are at one level in the society can help others at a certain level in society, so that mutually human beings engage in this mutual relationship. So this is the system that Allah Ta'ala puts in place. And by no means does the fact that, if one person has and another person has less, does that mean that that person is lower? It just means that that person has less at that level and in that aspect, but in a different quality, in a different characteristic, from a different point of view of blessings. The other person is more advantageous. So while one person may have more money, another person may have more health or more patience or more maybe more generous, for example. May have a better work ethic, may be more ethical and moral in their conduct. It may be a better example for the person, for example. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't discount people based upon what's apparent and what's obvious, right? And so Allah divides His rahmah up in different ways. Our job is not to be critical or analytical in the sense that Allah loves this person, Allah doesn't love that person based upon what's apparently obvious to us and what's not obvious to us. So Allah redefines greatness, and greatness is in taqwa, and taqwa is a matter that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. And on this matter of gold and gold ornaments, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in this chapter that the wearing of gold, the embellishment and the adorning of ourselves with gold is something that is a characteristic of the believers in heaven, right? So this is very interesting point. It's in this chapter that Allah says the people of heaven, the people in Jannah, they will be the ones adorned in gold. Asawirahum min fidda min dhahabin, Allah Ta'ala says that they will have gold ornaments and gold bracelets in Jannah, everybody. So if you are so enamored by gold ornaments, go to heaven. Make sure you go to Jannah, and there you'll have all the gold ornaments you could ever think about. And to this effect, the Prophet ﷺ told his followers and his community members, he said, "La ta'kulu fi aniyati adh-dhahabi wal-fidda." Don't any of you drink out of gold or silver containers. So he prohibited ﷺ, the believers, the community, from drinking and eating from gold and silver plates and utensils and forks and knives and cups. He said, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا فِي صِحَافِهَا, and don't eat off of gold and silver plates. So don't drink from gold or silver containers, and don't eat from gold and silver plates. And then he said, ﷺ, فَإِنَّهَا لَهُمْ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَلَكُمْ فِي الْآخِرَةِ, because those things are for them, meaning people who are not part of the community of the Prophet ﷺ, idolaters, polytheists, etc., those who don't believe in the message of Allah Ta'ala. That's for them. Those people who are addicted, who love gold and silver and ornamentation and think that's what Allah loves. He said, that's for them in the world. He said, but these things are for you in the next world, in the akhirah. So this is where we should turn our attention to. And the Prophet ﷺ was very clear about the value of this world. He said, if this world had any value with Allah Ta'ala, then someone who doesn't believe in Allah would not get, anything at all, not even a sip of water, if this world had any value so much as the weight of the wing of a mosquito. If that were the case, then someone who rejected Allah, doesn't believe in Allah, would not in any way get anything of any value, not even a sip of water. So the real value with Allah Ta'ala is in the next life. The other thing that this chapter introduces us to is that we are in transport, right? We are in motion. So we're being transported from this life into the next. And transportation in this chapter of the Quran, chapter 43, is considered a blessing of Allah, a blessing of God. And therefore, there's a prayer for transportation that's in verse 13 and verse 14 in this chapter that we should all pay attention to and remember that anytime we use transportation, whether it's animal transportation or in a vehicle or a plane or a boat, whatever mode of transportation that we choose to mount, there's a prayer in those two verses, verse 13 and 14, that we are to say, Subhanalladhi sakhara lana hadha wa ma kunna lahu muqrinin wa inna ila rabbina lamunqalibun, which means glory be to the one who has controlled and subjugated this transport for me, and I would not have any ability to do it myself. And this is to remind me that I'm in transport, returning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the idea of transportation should remind us that we are returning to Allah Ta'ala. And so therefore, when you get in your cars, if you mount your bicycles, take a bus, take a train, anytime you mount that, verse 13 and 14 is what you should say to remind yourself that you are in active transportation to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a powerful chapter, 43. Take it all in and really internalize it. Chapter 44, Dukhan, talks about smoke. Now, why in the world would there be a chapter in the Quran about smoke? Not about smoking. Well, haram, yani, this is haram. Smoke. Smoke here is a reference to two things. First of all, the overall theme of the chapter is about the smoke that will that will appear in this world, and then also the smoke that precludes and introduces the day of judgment. And then the second aspect of this chapter is that it talks about the obstinance and the hard-headedness, if you will, of rulers and oppressors that are wealthy, and they're blinded, almost to say if their vision is clouded. Here's the metaphor of the smoke again. Their vision, their ability to see and perceive guidance is clouded by their ambitions and by their wealth. So the use of dukhan, the use of smoke in this chapter is a reality, but also a metaphor. So the first thing is the reality part. The reality part is the fact that, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ had, after so many years of trying to convince the Meccans, made du'as to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala against them, to test, to get them to believe in his message. And there was a huge plume of smoke that came, and with it brought droughts and dried up land. In the very same way the Prophet said, give them drought and dried up land, in the same way that Prophet Yusuf had, alayhi salam, so that the people would be inspired to turn to Allah Ta'ala, to ask him for rain and to change their ways from idolatry and associating partners with Allah. So on the one hand, this is it, and then the other hand, related to that, is the presence of a smoke-like phenomenon and a mist-like phenomenon that will happen near the end of time. And this is very scary, because in some contemporary modern interpretations, this mist, this smoke-like phenomenon or mist-like phenomenon has a few interpretations. One of them is that, the earth will be filled with actual smoke itself, and I interpret that to mean pollution. For example, the earth will be filled with pollution as a result of industrialization and human beings, corruption of the planet. And so through pollution and chemicals, we find that the entire earth will be, covered in clouds of smoke. And the old authors at the time just commented on this, but they did not have the understanding and the wherewithal that we have today about pollution and the industrial revolution and poisons in the atmosphere and things of that nature. They just commented on smoke filling the earth. Now we have a different understanding of what smoke filling the earth looks like, feels like, smells like, and the destruction of pollution and polluted chemicals in our environment. And as an extension of this smoke filling the earth, many of the scholars who are relating statements from the earlier generations say that as a result of this, there will be things like illnesses that come into the community. And so we know from being in the modern time is that, from the pollution comes illnesses, a rise in disease, especially influenzas. And now, of course, in the time that we're in now, with the coronavirus, right? Through all kinds of activities and deforestation and industrialized activities, that things rise to the surface. And amongst the things that rise to the surface is viruses and bacteria. And that this will be a cause of the sickness of human beings, and this will be a prelude to the day of judgment. Now, I am not saying that the coronavirus is when it's over, it'll be the day of judgment. Don't misinterpret. But what we are saying, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is alluding to, and Allah knows best, is that this idea of the dukhan, of smoke emerging as a sign of the day of judgment. It's one of these signs, one of the alamat of the sa'a. And in the verse in question, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that because of people's obstinance and their rejection of Allah ta'ala, they will be exposed to a smoke that is very clear. In other words, it's clear that this is not a normal thing, that this is something that is to foretell something else happening, that this is an alarm that is going off. And so whether this can take the form of actual smoke in the terms of global pollution, where there's global warming, which contributes to climate change and so many other things, in addition to smoke that you can't see, meaning a mobilized force that is visible but not with the naked eye, that circulates the globe and in the form of a pandemic that emerges because of so many other things related to the modern situation, and because the modern world pushes people to a more secular environment that causes people and puts people in a state where we are more prone to forget Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to be distracted through our devices and our habits. So this is what Dukhan as a chapter is talking about, which couples with the rise of in our time of wealthy oppressors. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there were very, very few wealthy oppressors. In our time, there's wealthy oppressors all over the globe. So this chapter talks about the phenomenon of the rise not only of smoke, but of wealthy oppressors who are obstinate and in their rejection of the truth. And Allah compares these oppressors to oppressors of the past, Pharaoh, the people of Mecca, and the people of what he calls Tubba. Tubba is the name of the kings of Yemen in the town of Sheba, the town of Seba. Remember, we talked about the queen of Sheba and Seba. So their kings were called Tubba. This was an honorific title of the kings of Seba, the forefathers and of the Arabs. And so Allah compares, uses those three case scenarios: Pharaoh of Musa, the Tubba kings of Yemen and Seba, and he calls them Tubba in this chapter. So if you're reading in Arabic, when you come across the word Tubba, that's the title of the kings of Sheba, of the town of Seba. And also the people of Mecca are used as a case study in this for wealthy oppressors that reject Allah. And those are used as a study for people of our generation. So so that we can understand what Allah did to wealthy oppressors that abused their ni'mah, rejected their bounties, and then were filled with smoke, right? That smoke look different in their times. And Allah says something scary about them. He says in this chapter that when Allah wipes away those oppressors, he said neither the sky nor the earth will cry or even remember them, right? They won't even mention them. There'll be no crying. They won't miss them. They won't even, sort of blink an eye at the fact that they're gone. Nor the heavens nor the earth. Nobody will care about them when they're gone. So this is a sign that is mentioned in this chapter. And finally, brothers and sisters, chapter 45, which we could spend an entire hour on this chapter, but really we don't have that time. So in the last 3 minutes, inshallah, chapter 45. Chapter 45 is about, it's called Al-Jathiyah, which means on your knees, right? Those on their knees. And this is a allusion, a reference to the fact, to verse 28. And when you're reading this chapter, hone in on verse 28. Allah Ta'ala talks about the fact that all the communities on the Day of Judgment will be on their knees. All right, this is very scary. In a kneeling posture. And this is not the kneeling posture that's like in the prayer. This is, when somebody's saying, get on your knees. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you are kneeling because of awe, out of fear, and fright. It's different from the kneeling even in the prayer. So Jathiyah is different from, for example, Jalsa and Qa'ada in the Arabic language. In the Arabic language, Qa'ada means to go into a kneeling position from standing because you want to take a rest. And Jalasa, which also means to sit, means that you're sitting down from a lying down position, from resting. But Jathiyah, in the name of this chapter, is to sit on your knees, not because of rest, but because of obedience and fear at the context. And so the context is that the hellfire, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he also mentions this in Surah Maryam in the Quran, chapter 19 in the Quran, verse 68, mentions the same phenomenon where Allah says they will be kneeling around the hellfire, on the border of hell. Everyone will be kneeling, and then judgment will begin. This idea that hell will be brought forth, all the communities will then be dropped to their knees, right? The day of judgment is called Yawmul Qiyamah. It's the day of standing. But then hellfire is brought forth, and the terror of hell drops people to their knees in fright. And so this is Jathiyah, the fact that when the presence of Jahannam comes, when the presence of the fire comes, what every single person's instinct says is on your knees, right? Jathiyah, on your knees. and people drop down immediately. And they'll be there for a time period. And then Allah mentions in this chapter that the believers in Allah will then be enveloped by the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So everyone's dropped to their knees because of the magnitude and fright and sheer terror of the situation. But then the mu'minun, Allah says in the chapter right after that, the mu'minun will be enveloped on all sides by the rahmah and the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And so they'll be protected from this day. And so there's a lot of emphasis on this chapter, on the signs of Allah Ta'ala, the strong signs of Allah Ta'ala on the Day of Judgment. And there's a lot of discussion in this chapter about the arguments of skeptics. So this is a very powerful juz. Chapter 25, juz 25, part 25 is no joke. Consultation, gold ornaments, smoke, and on your knees. Very powerful reminder for us in these last 10 days. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless us, forgive us, enhance us, and bring us close to Him in this life so that we may be enveloped in mercy in next life, inshallah. Join us tomorrow night, inshallah ta'ala, brothers and sisters, as we continue our journey through the Quran and discover what Juz 26 has in store for us and the rest of our lives. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.